We're here with Leo with Bound. Tell us about Bound.
So Bound is an art empathy game that's all about the physical limitations of running in a chest binder. It combines walking simulator and rhythm game elements to do that.
All right, and forgive me, for those not familiar with chest binding.
So chest binding is a practice by transmasculine people using a really tight article of clothing, whether that's a commercial binder. Some people unfortunately use like ace bandages, which you're not supposed to flatten your chest and appear more masculine. It's to alleviate gender dysphoria.
Cool. So I noticed when we were looking at it in there, you had a section leading up to the actual simulator, the actual like more rhythm side of the game. It seems like you almost had two different games going on there, like a walking simulator and a whole different section of the game. Was that because you didn't know how to kind of get the intro to the game down, or like what led to the decision to have these two different sections like that? Like the approach, basically.
That's an interesting question. So it's the game is a memoir style game, so it's inspired from a personal experience, and I wanted to have the piece where you're exploring the exterior of a middle school. So the protagonist has come back to their middle school wearing a binder, regardless of the physical restrictions that like it's hard to exercise in something that's that tight. Go back to this location and just go for a run, because that was something that they enjoyed doing. So I wanted to express that location as well as have the mini game embody the physicality of running.
So the thing about like walking simulators, and it sounds like you're very focused on this, is the sort of meta story that's happening as you're exploring this space. Was that like your primary focus, was telling the story, and the gameplay aspects were sort of just a means to that end?
Yeah, it's exactly that. There was definitely context that was important to give, and even the way that it's written right now, it's targeted towards people who are allies of transmasculine people, so people who are knowledgeable of that community. So when people who don't really know about the trans community play the game, it kind of goes over their head, even with the context that's there. But that's okay, because it's
well, that actually leads to another good question about chest binding in particular. Then. I noticed that with the mini game component, there was feet and which button you're hitting at which time.
Yeah.
What is the gameplay considerations here that incorporate the chest binding aspect, or is this just a narrative framework for players to think about while they're experiencing it, or do you find that there's something of very specific difference that you would do if you were adhering to the chest binding narrative versus not? Like, how does that change that mini game?
That's an interesting question. I think it's more of...
It's fine to be a framework, but like it's just like where is the headspace of the designer here? Like,
so I wanted something that was as physical as I could be with the input of a keyboard.
Okay.
So originally when I designed it, it was sort of a key smashing game. But the way that was implemented wasn't communicating what people were supposed to be doing. It was hectic. So I had a playtester suggest, well, what if this was like a rhythm game, because then you'd be implying pace? Because the rhythm game isn't actually set to music. It's just the like little prompts are scrolling at the screen, and they get faster and faster.
So there can be a rhythm there, even without the music. Your finger typing is the rhythm. But
so it's implying a pace. I'm not sure if it would change if the chest binding element was taken out, rather than you could somehow win. I don't know.
Well, the chest binding essentially it ends the game every time, because you go faster and faster, and eventually it just sort of causes you.
Right. So you can't really take in enough oxygen here. Yeah. But so there's context. There's no real wrong answer to the question. I was just trying to get the sense. And actually, I had forgotten about the ending. I only saw very brief stuff from the trailer and from looking over your shoulder there in the other room. And I had forgotten about the passing out ending, which makes a huge difference. So obviously, there you go, right there. Like that's a huge difference in how you're conveying this particular. Like you'd say, experience in a way that you wouldn't have if you didn't have the chest binding.
Yeah, and you talked about this not being for people who are not already familiar with this community, but I think one of the interesting things about your game is that the gameplay actually reinforces the narrative. Like in the running, it's getting more and more frantic, and then eventually you always lose, right? So that sort of is playing into the narrative and is showing a world to somebody who maybe is not part of that community, right?
Right.
Yeah,
So have you thought about like
yeah.
using this as a way to show people like what this experience is like? And
So I've thought about this a lot working on this project. I think empathy games are tricky because you're representing one experience, and to say that
Right.
the experience that's represented in the game is representative of all trans people, I would be worried that I would be appropriating somebody's experience and then generalizing that experience, and then somebody who played the game might think, oh, like I'm educated myself because I'd played this game, but if they don't then go and act to help a trans person's situation or to go educate themselves about other people, what good is the game doing? I don't know.
yeah, I'm sort of thinking more of less about like here's trans 101 game. No,
Yeah.
that's not what I'm talking about. But maybe like this is an experience that one person has had that you can sort of live in their shoes and see what that.
Yeah, what's great already. I feel like that's something I
Empathize
never
with that.
considered. I was like, oh my gosh, yeah. Like, how would you run that sort of stuff? I'd never really thought about it. So it's already effectively communicating an idea and a concept. Yeah, like my earlier question, I had totally like forgotten about the end of it, which is the point. So yeah, I feel like the idea of memoir games is something that's brand new. Not necessarily brand new, but it's something we're seeing really emerge. Is that the kind of thing that you want to explore more of? Do you feel like memoir games are something that speaks to you?
They're definitely therapeutic. I really enjoy making them.
Have you made others?
Yeah, I made a board game about the anti-transgender bathroom bill. I'm inspired a lot by Ananthropy and all of her creations. In particular, Dysphoria is something that I keep going back and playing just because it's so brilliant. I do think that I am done making games that are so serious. I think a game doesn't have to be so serious to have the message that I want it to have. So.
Well, as game developers, it's nice. I mean, we can make a bunch of stuff. My question is, I'm gonna throw a kind of a hardball one at you, and that is like, whenever we make a game, especially a personal one, we come out, presumably, I'm not going to speak for you, but I'm going to guess that we all set out with some vision, something that we want to convey, but it doesn't always, we learn stuff from the experience. What went wrong?
I think I struggled a lot with, I'm not a 3D artist, but I wanted to recreate an environment from my past with 3D assets that I just like cobbled together from the Unity asset store. So I look at the game, I'm like, oh, it's so ugly. But it was all that I had. I'm really happy with how the project turned out. I think I scoped appropriately for the amount of time that I had, which was made my life so much easier.
Yeah, that's smart.
Working on it. And I was by myself, so I didn't have to deal with any team dynamic problems.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can only do so much on your own, but it's a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then last question in 15 seconds. No serious games next. What's next?
What's next? We've got another game in there that's Octodad Except You're Flying. So that's next.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Are you in any pain?
No,
Can you tell me what happened?
I went on a run. But I was wearing a binder and it was hard to breathe. So I just passed out.
Why didn't you stop?
I don't know. I think I'm just tired of feeling helpless.
Helpless? I'm afraid I don't understand.